Hello, and welcome to a drama crash course. I'm Alyssa, and we'll be digging deep, really deep, into Fences by August Wilson.
The play Fences was written by August Wilson. August Wilson was an award-winning American playwright who chronicled the African-American experience through a series of 10 plays. He was born Frederick August Kittle, Jr. on April 27, 1945, in the Hill District of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. His father was a German immigrant named Frederick August Kittle, and his mother was an African-American woman named Daisy Wilson. From a young age, Wilson began to read such writers as W.E.B. Du Bois, Langston Hughes, Ralph Ellison, and Richard Wright, which influenced his own writing. Mainly self-educated and after holding various jobs, Mr. Wilson became involved with Rob Penny and Black Horizons on the Hill, a Pittsburgh theater company in the late 1960s. In 1981, Wilson married Judy Oliver. The year 1982 was particularly fruitful for Wilson, as it marked his introduction to Lloyd Richards, who went on to direct Wilson's first 6 Broadway plays. Wilson's play Fences premiered on Broadway in 1987, earning the playwright his first Pulitzer Prize as well as a Tony Award. However, Wilson divorced Judy Oliver in 1990. In 1994, Wilson married for the third time to a costume designer named Constanza Romero. 7 Guitars made its way onto the Broadway stage 2 years later, followed by the birth of Wilson's and Romero's daughter, Azula, in 1997. August Wilson died of liver cancer on October 2nd, 2005, in Seattle, Washington.
Fences was written in 1983 and later produced in 1985. However, the play takes place in 1950s, which is the era of the civil rights.
In the 1950s, America's industry was just beginning to expand, and racial segregation was ruled unconstitutional in public schools by the U.S. Supreme Court case Brown v. Board. The South was still officially segregated, and in the North, many African Americans faced unofficial racial barriers. You can see in the play how Troy was affected by the racism that still existed in pro sports when he played, as compared to more modern times that his son was playing in. Remembering the barriers that he faced, he feels concerned for his son's opportunity to have playing time. Finally, Troy's last name, Maxon, is a compressed reference to the Mason-Dixon line. It was considered as the imaginary line originally conceived of in 1820 to define the separation between slave and free states.
Like most families in the 1950s, the Maxons lived in a small suburban home. And nothing says anything like a family enjoying the outdoors together. Back to you, Alyssa.
The play is centered around Troy, whose life got twisted upside down, and I'd like you to take a minute, just sit right there while I tell you all about how it got thrown up in the air. Okay, so first we have 3 main characters, which is Troy, Rose, and Corey. And the rest are all minor characters, who are Bono, Mr. Rand, Gabriel, Pearl, Loins, Raynell, Bonnie, Alberta, Mr. Stawicki, and finally, Coach Zellman.
First we have Troy Maxon, who is the protagonist. He works in the garbage disposal industry after his fallen fame in the African American Baseball League. While many other characters look up to him, he himself falters in his drinking problem and cheating on his wife, Rose. Rose is 10 years younger than Troy, but loves him unconditionally and can be seen as selfless when she accepts his child, Raynell, that he had with Alberta. Alberta dies during childbirth and symbolizes Troy's ultimate desires of being free from his real problems. As a side note, Alberta is his mistress, that Bono points out later in the story. Many of Troy's problems stem from his son Corey. Corey is an athlete who is following his dreams in becoming a football player, which causes Troy to become envious. Then there is Loins, who is the son of only Troy, whom is a freeloader. He has a girlfriend, Bonnie, who works in the laundry department for the hospital. Eventually, these two break up. We are then introduced to Troy's brother, Gabriel, as a perfectly normal man who works and has found a new apartment. Later, we come to find out that he has suffered brain damage after fighting in World War II. When Troy passes, this is when the author alludes to the Archangel Gabriel. Aside from the family, there is Bono, who is Troy's best friend. He admires Troy and one day wishes to be as successful as him. He comes over on Friday nights and always has men talk with Troy. As for more of the minor characters, there's Pearl, Gabriel's landlady, Mr. Stewicki, who's Corey's boss at the A&P, and Coach Zellman, Corey's football coach who believes in him and his abilities. Finally, Mr. Rand is the egotistical boss of both Troy and Bono, who perpetuates the idea of racial segregation that still existed far after the time of civil rights movement. The themes in Fences include race, men and masculinity, mortality, dreams, hopes, plans, and family. The motifs of this play include death and baseball and blues. In Act 1, Scene 1, Troy Maxson declares, "Death ain't nothing but a fastball in the outside corner." With this line, the former Negro League slugger merges his past experience as a ball player with his philosophy. Troy, Bono, and Rose argue about the quality of the major black player compared to Troy when he was in his prime. A fastball in the outside corner was home run material for Troy. Though Troy feels beleaguered from work and deeply troubled by coming along too early to play in the major leagues because they were still segregated when he was in top form, Troy believes he is unconquerable and almost immortal when it comes to issues of life and death. Troy knows he overcame pneumonia 10 years ago, survived an abusive father and treacherous conditions in his adaptation to surviving in an urban environment when he walked north to live in Pittsburgh and jail. Baseball is what Troy is most proud of, and he knows he conquered on his own. In this first scene of the play, Troy is afraid of nothing, values his life, and feels in control. Troy's attitude towards death is proud and nonchalant. Troy says, "Ain't nothing wrong with talking about death. That's part of life. Everybody's gonna die. You gonna die, I'm gonna die, Bono's gonna die. Hell, we all gonna die." He has not recently experienced a personal loss so great that it humbles and weakens his spirit. In the same scene, Troy compares death to an army that marched towards him in July 1941 when he had pneumonia while fighting in the war. He describes death as an army, an icy touch on the shoulder, a grinning face. Troy claims he spoke to death. Troy thinks he constantly has to be on guard against Death's army. He claims he saw Death standing with a sickle in his hand, spoke to Death, and wrestled with Death for 3 days and 3 nights. After the wrestling match, Troy saw Death put on a white robe with a hood on it and leave to look for his sickle. Troy admits, "Death ain't nothing to play with, and I know he's gonna get me," but he refuses to succumb to death easily. Troy follows the Bible quotation, "Be ever vigilant," in his attitude towards death. In his perception of death, Troy mutates the form of death many times, from fastball to a sickle-carrying, devil-like figure, and finally composting the devil into a Ku Klux Klan member in his white robe ceremony regalia. His image of death being composed of a marching army or leading an army transforms into this KKK leader image that has camp followers. As the play progresses, Troy repeatedly merges his baseball metaphors with his death rhetoric. In the last lines of numerous scenes, Troy speaks to death out loud, taunting Death to try to come after him, and or warns Corey that his behavior is causing him to strike out. Corey makes 3 mistakes in Troy's eyes, and when he strikes out, Troy kicks him out of the house. Troy's death and baseball metaphors are inextricably linked. Admitting that he was too old to play baseball when the major leagues integrated would kill Troy's belief that he was directly cheated out of a special life that he deserved and earned. To Troy, it is enough of an injury that the major leagues were segregated during his prime. He sees baseball as the best time of his life, but also the death of his hopes and dreams. When Corey was born, Troy promised he would not allow his son to experience the same disappointment he was subjected to in baseball. So Troy equates Corey's pursuit of a dream as strong as his father's as mistakes worthy of warning and punishment or strikes that Troy believes will prevent Corey from reaching the same fate as Troy did. August Wilson says he uses the language and attitude of blues songs to inspire his plays and play characters. The blues is a melancholy song created by black people in the United States that tend to repeat a 12-bar phrase of music and a 3-line stanza that repeats the first line of a second line. A blues song usually contains several blue or minor notes in the melody and harmony. Fences is structured somewhat like a blues song. The play all takes place in one place, like a key of music, and the characters each have their own rhythm and melody that Wilson riffs off of around the common locale. Characters repeat phrases or pass phrases around like a blues band with a line of melody. Similar to the role of repeated lyrics and melody of a blues song, Wilson's character display changes in their life and a changed attitude toward life by repeating scenarios in which they act. For instance, Friday, Troy's payday, is the setting of 3 scenes. By mirroring the situation in which events in the play take place, we can observe the change that occurs from one instance to the next. For instance, in Act 1, Scene 1, Troy and Bono come home after payday as best friends worried about Troy's future. In Act 1, Scene 4, Troy and Bono celebrate after payday because Troy won his discrimination case. But Bono is more concerned that Troy will ruin his life with this extramarital affair. Troy comes home after payday in Act 2, Scene 4, estranged from Bono and his family. He drinks and sings to comfort himself. By now, the good old days of the play's first scene seem far gone. This is a way playwrights manipulate the sense of time in a play, but for Wilson in particular, the repeated events and language of the play are in keeping what he calls a blues aesthetic. Wilson's plays are extensions of the history of blues in African American culture, and thus in American culture in general. Troy sings 2 blues songs, one in Act 2, Scene 3, plays Mr. Engineer, Let a Man Ride the Line, and in Act 2, Scene 4, Hear It Ring, Hear It Ring. Rose also sings a song in Act 1, Scene 2, Jesus Be a Fence All Around Me Every Day. Wilson invented these lyrics but based them on themes and symbols in African American traditional, spiritual, gospel, and blues songs. Troy's song is a religious song, so hers might have more roots in the gospel tradition. Troy's songs are truly from the blues tradition. His song, Hear It Ring, was passed on to him by his father, and in the last scene of the play, we witness Corey and Raynell singing the song together after Troy's death. The blues in Fences connects generations together and keeps a family's roots alive and history beyond the grave. Most of Fences is set in the 1950s. Slavery had gone from America for over 70 years, but its shadow still pressed down on the country. All the characters in the play are African American, and they must deal with racism every day. Fences is often thought of as a father-son play. The main conflict centers on the tension between Troy Maxon and his son Corey. The play shows how Troy in many ways repeats the mistakes of his father while raising Corey. Fences also questions what it is to be a man. Throughout the play, we are forced to ask what it takes to be a good man. Is it duty to your family? Is it following your heart? Fences seems to view human mortality as both a dark inevitability and our ultimate chance at peace. When the gates of heaven open for Troy at the end of the play, we're left with the impression that he's found rest in the afterlife. Troy Maxon, the protagonist of Fences, has had his dreams taken from him. He wanted more than anything to be a pro baseball player, but his career was stopped short because of racial discrimination. Revolving around the trials and tribulations of the Maxon family, Fences is a great example of a family drama. We watch Troy struggle to fulfill his role as father to his son and husband to his wife. You could say that Troy doesn't do such a great job in either role. Before his death, his family has all but disintegrated due to his failure. However, by the end of the play, we see that the family has also grown by his example. Fences depicts the complex dynamics that both tear families apart and hold them together.
There are 2 allusions in Fences. The first being Gabriel, which is Troy's brother. Gabriel is an archangel who sounds his horns to heaven, basically saying this is the time for God to take his people and judge them if they're going to heaven or hell. And the second allusion is St. Peter, who actually caved into the devil's power and turned in Jesus, causing him to be sentenced to death. That is to say, ironically, Gabriel killed 2 birds with 1 stone. Who turned in Jesus. Oh. And later produced in fail. There are allusions in Fences.
It's mine! This would be the perfect time for the cat to attack Kasey's hand. Oh! Gnaw your finger off.
Ways yet.
No, no!
My cat's like, I want out now.
Now go.
Dang it! And nothing says a family get together like